Hello, my name is Matthew Shipley and I have the honor of serving on the Stoa Speech Committee. I hope you enjoyed the introductory video on speech penalty re-ranking, and I trust that you found it helpful in developing a basic understanding of how re-ranking works. In this advanced video on re-ranking, we're going to be communicating with a variety of people, including tournament staff, such as tournament directors, ballot return staff, and tab staff. And we're also going to be communicating with parents and other judges and the competitors themselves, because we think that it's valuable for everyone to understand how re-ranking works. So in this video, we're going to be examining some more advanced scenarios, some of which are somewhat theoretical in nature, but they are all designed to help illustrate important concepts about re-ranking and to help prepare people to face any re-ranking scenario that they may face at a tournament. So with that in mind, let's go ahead and take a look at some of these more advanced scenarios together. In the introductory video, we walked through the first 3 examples of re-ranking, and in this advanced video, we're going to take a look at the remaining 4 examples, starting with scenario 4. I call this one, "And the first shall be last." Now, you'll understand why we're calling it that as you see how this plays out. So, to get started, we have an original rank that goes from top to bottom just for the sake of simplicity moving forward. So in this particular room, every competitor went overtime except for Nevaeh. So everyone has a 1 rank penalty in the second column. Okay, now it's not very likely, but it could happen. It's kind of theoretical, but it helps to illustrate something important. So the question now is, after we've done our addition, I guess we'll ask our question after that. So let's do the addition. 1 and 1 is 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and 7 and 1 is 8. And then we have a tie for 8th. Okay, so now the question again is, who gets first rank in this room? Well, do we have anybody in first in the re-ranking column? Why, no, we do not. So we can start taking a look at 2nd, 3rd, 4th, 5th, 6th, 7th, and 8th. I know with a tie for 8 there, but none of these up here can have the first rank because they all have penalties. So that would be the case unless the exception occurred, which we'll talk about in an upcoming example. So nobody up here can get first rank, therefore only Nevaeh can get first rank. So there's our first, okay? From there, it actually flows out pretty simply with Micah on 2nd, Raymond 3rd, 4th, 5th, 6th, 7th, and 8th. So in this particular scenario, the re-ranking affected the entire room for obvious reasons. With that in mind, let's move on to the next scenario. This 5th scenario is going to help us illustrate an important concept that we've been talking about. And that is that if a competitor has a penalty, their final rank can be worse than or equal to their re-rank, but not better, unless the exception occurs, and we'll be talking about that after this scenario. On the other hand, if a competitor does not have a penalty, their final rank can be better than or equal to their re-rank, but not worse. So let's see how this plays out. In this scenario, we have 4 competitors with penalties. Micah has a 2 here, Heather has a 3, Kendall has a 1, and Addison has 1 rank penalty. Simple math going across, simple addition, 4, 6, 4, 3, 8, 5, 5, and 8. So we're looking for our first ranked competitor in the final ranking. And so we're going to look at the re-ranking column. We don't have anybody in first there. We don't have anybody in second. We do have someone in third, and that person does not have any penalties. So that person, that's Jorge, in this scenario gets our first final rank. Our second final rank cannot go to either of our tied 4th place re-rank competitors because they both have penalties. So we're going to move on from there, look at our 5th. Well, we have a tie for 5th, but Addison can't have second because Addison has a penalty. So Thaddeus gets second. Now to assign the 3rd final rank, again, we're looking for 3s, but we've already assigned that person. We have 2 that are tied for 4th, but neither one can have 3rd because of their penalties. And so now we're going to move in our Fifth is done. This one can't have it. So we're going to move to the sixth re-rank competitor, and that's Raymond, who's going to get third in the final ranking. Now, to assign fourth final ranking, we can now look at those that we remember had a tie for fourth. Neither one could get better than fourth, but either one could conceivably get fourth. Only one can, so who's going to break that tie? Micah wins the tie because Micah has fewer penalties in this column. So there's our fourth, leading us to Heather at fifth. Who's going to get sixth? Well, we only have 3 competitors left. We have Kendall with a re-ranking of 8, and Kendall has a penalty. Addison with a re-ranking of 5 with a penalty, and Nevaeh with a re-ranking of 8 with no penalties. So who gets 6th? Well, we see that Addison is eligible for 5th or a lesser final rank. So Addison then gets 6th place, because Addison could not get better than 5th, but could certainly get the same as or worse than 5th in the final ranking. Then moving on from there, our 7th place is going to go to one of these 2 with the 8 here, and it's going to go to the one without any penalties at all, or the lesser penalties. So there's our 7th, and here's our 8th. Now again, in this scenario, we have affected the final outcome of every competitor in the round. And that came as a result of 4 students who had penalties. Scenario 6 is going to help us illustrate the exception to guideline number 2, which is that there cannot be any final ranks worse than the total number of competitors in the room. Okay, so let's play this out. In this scenario, every competitor in the room went overtime, and so everybody has a 1 rank penalty. Again, not highly likely, but it's going to help illustrate how this works. So simple math, moving across then, since we put them in order to begin with, is going to be 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, and there it is, 9, because 8 plus 1 is 9. Now we know nobody's actually going to end up with 9, but in the re-ranking column, we can certainly have 9, 10, 11. You can have some larger numbers, even 2-digit numbers in this column. So the question here is, who's going to get first final rank? Every competitor in the round has a penalty. So since we cannot have a final rank that is lesser than the number of competitors in the room, which is 8, then we're going to have to revert all of them back to their original ranking so that it comes out like this: 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and 8. I hope that makes sense, but again, we're illustrating the fact that 9th is only theoretical in the re-ranking column. It cannot show up in the final rank column. We can only have 1 through 8. So in this scenario, the exception applies to all 8 competitors, and they all revert to their original rank as their final rank. Scenario 7 is going to help reinforce the exception to guideline number 2, and it's going to do it in kind of a complex situation. So let's put in the penalties. All but one of our competitors have penalties here. Heather happens to have 3 penalties ranks, and Jorge, Kendall, Addison, and Thaddeus each have 1. Nevaeh is the only competitor in this scenario that did not get a penalty. All right, so let's do our math. 2, 3, 6, 5, 6, 7, 8, and 8. All right, that's the easy part. Now from here, we're going to be looking for our final rank competitor who's going to be first in the room. So we don't have anybody with a 1 in the re-ranking column. And we do see a 2 and a 3 and some other numbers like this, but the problem is all of these competitors up here, Micah through Thaddeus, all of them have penalties. And so really none of them should have a rank that's better than their re-rank column. Nevaeh is the only one without a penalty in the entire room, and so Nevaeh is free to go ahead and take first in the final rank, and that's what's going to happen. Now from here we move forward. It gets easy for a couple of them because Micah has a re-ranking of second. Had a penalty, but can certainly have second, no problem there, and there's no other tie for second, so Micah gets second. And there's only 1 3 in the re-ranking column. That's Raymond, and so that's fine. Raymond can have 3. Now here's the tricky part. Who gets 4th in this room? Now that might seem like a simple question, but in reality, it's a little more complex than one might think. So when we look at this, nobody has a 4 here. And so if we don't assign 4 to one of these competitors, then what's going to end up happening is we have to skip number 4, and we're going to end up with somebody in rank number 9. Well, that doesn't work, because once this goes to tab, since there are 8 competitors in the room, we need a final rank of 1 through 8. So this is where that exception comes in, and it first affects Jorge, who is actually going to end up with a final rank that is better than his re-rank of 5. So Jorge, having the best re-rank of the remaining options, is going to get number 4. Now, who's going to get number 5? Well, we have a tie for 6th in the re-rank column, so one of them is obviously going to get it, because after that you just have 7 and 8 left. So let's use our tie-breaking criterion, and that is lesser penalties wins the tie. So Kendall is going to get 5th, which is better than her re-rank column. Heather is going to get 6th, which is exactly what she had in the re-rank column. And then from there it's easy. Addison gets 7th, and Thaddeus gets 8th. So the point here is that this exception affected 2 competitors. That's Jorge and Kendall, who each ended up with a final rank that was better than their re-rank column. So remember, it can get kind of complex when this thing plays out like this, but if you understand the guidelines for re-ranking and how this works, then you can flow through this pretty easily. Just make sure you follow those guidelines. Make sure that you have final ranks 1 through 8 if you only have 8 competitors in the room. Make sure that nobody with a penalty gets better than their re-rank column number, unless that would generate final ranks that are worse than the total numbers of competitors in the room. So I hope that makes sense. I hope you've enjoyed this and found it helpful in understanding with greater depth how re-ranking works. To finish out this discussion of re-ranking, I want to recommend that in addition to having your ballot return staff and other tournament staff members watch these videos, I'd like to recommend that you also do some practicing with them on these scenarios. You can use these scenarios that we presented or similar scenarios, but the main thing is you just need to create a little grid like this with some names and some columns and fill in numbers, and then have your staff members practice doing these re-ranking scenarios or something similar. And so do this on paper with them before the first round of speech ballots is due to arrive in your tournament, and I think you'll find very positive results in terms of how smoothly ballot return goes. Again, I hope you enjoyed this video, and we'll look forward to seeing you at an upcoming tournament.